Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend and give input to the timely discussion on Montserrat's renewable energy opportunities. Critically, Montserrat has proven renewable energy resources. The only question is, how do we exploit these for the economic development of the island and its people? Today's meeting will begin to shape the strategies and help set out the plan for the future. It is one of a series of meetings that have been held this week with other stakeholders, very much like yourselves, but the focus today is a lot more open-ended, and we really just want to hear from you. You will hear from our panel, our expert panel of local and UK authorities. We have with us Ms. Marissa Allen, the Director of Energy, acting within MCWLE. We have Dr. Selvin Maloney, the Director of Agriculture within Mali. Mrs. Rosetta West-Gerald, Director of Tourism within the Montserrat Tourism Office. We have with us Dr. Ryan as well from the Montserrat Volcano Observatory. And from the UK, from the head of the Governor's Office, Ms. Alba Smirlio from, hey. Don't react right there. Smirlio, from the Governor's Office / FCDO. She's the head of program. And we have as well with us our very special guest, Rick Gambetta of Green Cloud. So in terms of homekeeping, I know you've noticed that we have the cameras around the room. Thank you to GIU. I want to say it at the outset for your support and for being here today. But for the audience's information, just note that this session is being recorded for, we'll air it at a later date. We're just collecting it now for information purposes. But all in all, though, we hope to have a healthy exchange this afternoon. We want to hear from you more than anything else. The discussions are structured in a way to kind of pull information from you, your thoughts on the particular topic. In order to continue setting the context for the day, I'm going to hand over to Alba, who's going to give you a bit more information on the origin of the project, and she's also going to give you some insight as to the end game that we're aiming for. Alba?
Hi, everyone. So the last name is Merillo, so well pronounced, Dion. You can hear me? Yeah, so thank you for coming, and thank you, Dion, for the introductions. So I just thought helpful to give a bit of an overview of what the project is about and how we came to this project. So a few of us from Government of Montserrat and Governor's Office attended a UK Antigua Trade and Investment Summit earlier this year. And we had the opportunity there to meet with a number of UK businesses. And it was really interesting to see how bringing UK businesses to Antigua and the opportunity for them to meet with local stakeholders really brought together ideas, as well as supported, deals and investments between Antigua and obviously the UK. So whilst there, we thought it would be a really great opportunity to do something similar here in Montserrat. We spoke with our UK trade colleagues and with Government of Montserrat here, and we put together a business case to organize a similar investment mission here in Montserrat. So we secured some funding for this. So this is the UK Montserrat Trade and Private Sector Investment Project. So with this funding, we'll have the opportunity to do two things. One is to see Montserrat represented at the UK Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum in November, which means that basically Montserrat will be the only British overseas territory represented in that forum. It will bring together many UK businesses and prime ministers from across the Caribbean, including Montserrat. So that's going to be a really great opportunity for us to pitch what Montserrat has to offer and also to meet with key UK businesses and stakeholders. As part of the project, we will also bring UK businesses to Montserrat for a 5-day investment mission here. And that will be in February 2025. So this consultation is part of that. To get to the point in which we know exactly what we need to, what kind of investments we want to bring here, and the companies we want to invite to Montserrat. We need to do a bit of analysis, and this is what Green Crowd is helping us to do here. And today we'll be focusing primarily on two sectors, as Dion said, so the blue economy and renewable energy. Next week, we will have DMA Invest, the organization who organized the trade investment mission in Antigua, and it will be looking at other sectors like tourism, agriculture, more holistically other sectors. So the end game of this is really to get your inputs on what are the key sectors that we should be looking to get investments from the private sectors in. Are there any specific projects or any partnerships opportunities that you're looking at that will help us to shortlist the investors that we invite here in Montserrat? So your input would be really greatly appreciated. So any questions in relation to the project, please, you can direct to me or the governor's office and obviously our colleagues in the ministries. And so even after this conversation, please do keep your thoughts and your comments coming. So we're here to get your inputs, please. So I think that's all that I had to say on the project. I will now hand over to Rick Gambetta, who will lead the discussion and give a short presentation of what the organization does and the objectives of the session today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honourable Ms. Good afternoon. Dion, thank you for your warm welcome. And Alba, thank you very much indeed also. You might be confused. We've got two UK representatives, both with Italian surnames, but that's the way of the world. We are multi-global and cultural. My name's Rick Gambetta, and I'm lucky enough to be here at Montserrat's second time this year. I was kindly invited by Alba and her team to carry out effectively an analysis of what's working, what isn't working, and how can we make things happen on Montserrat. So I'm going to give a sort of a short 7-minute presentation, and it won't take up too much time. And then I would encourage you to come up with all the questions you have on renewable energy and blue economy. It's really about the opportunities that you see, that you've witnessed in other islands, in other parts of the world, how they could be brought into Montserrat. So it's a constructive, let's try and sort of really get the debate going and talk about the opportunities. I'll give a little bit overview of our firm, but you know, why does it matter? It matters a lot. You know, I think the big thing is that renewables, decarbonisation of economies it's the way the world is going. No doubt about it. That is the pathway to success, to leading sustainable lives, creating socioeconomic stability. So this is a quote from BlackRock, but effectively it sort of sums up how capital is allocating its investments. It's looking for investments that last while, that are sustainable. And Montserrat has its natural resources, you know, fundamentally it underpins this country. And so we need to look at it from that lens as what is an investable proposition in Montserrat? How can we bring investors into Montserrat, but within the envelope that Montserrat has? And within the envelope means you can't bring something that works in the United States in terms of size of projects, size of investment. It has to be tailored to what Montserrat can afford and what it can deliver. It's not about just opportunities, it's about, you know, addressing something that's real. You know, I feel the heat this week, and I'm sure you all do, that it seems to be getting hotter. You know, temperatures are reaching new highs pretty much everywhere, and the climate is really changing. So it is also not about just finding investable opportunities, but also addressing the very key part of our lives, climate. What are the sort of objectives, really, of what's strategic vision for Montserrat? I think summing up into 6 different boxes. I think what can renewable energy deliver? Well, if done well, appropriately sized according to the economy, sized to the need, sized to the affordability, it can reduce energy costs. There is an investment in the grid that obviously is required in order to bring forward a lot of these projects. But ultimately, if the strategic vision is to reduce dependency on diesel, renewables has to be the answer. What else can the renewable energy and blue economy, sustainable tourism, sustainable marine tourism bring? It can lead the way towards sustainable economic growth. We see it in other countries where countries that adopt clean technology, lower cost, it brings its own ecosystem of investment. As I mentioned earlier, Montserrat has the natural resources available to it. It has geothermal, it's proven. I'm very lucky enough to see the site twice now, and I went up to the Montserrat Volcano Observatory with Dr. Ryan this week as well, and it's there. So let's see how we can make that project happen. Obviously, we also saw the wind turbines on top of St. George's Hill, sort of yesterday, but they were still there, obviously not working. But that is a proven resource. Solar, undoubted. But each technology has its own sort of weaknesses and strengths, and we need to figure out what works best when. One of the key aspects of the renewable energy roadmap, as Alba pointed, is to find the right projects, prioritize them. I don't think we can flicker our fingers, flick on a switch, and make the largest project work overnight. We need a pathway to success. So it's really about sort of finding the right path to delivering projects. And we might start off small projects, incrementally building up, and that might be the approach we take with geothermal. It's not to sort of shoot the stars tomorrow, but just try and make sure that every year we're advancing forward in the renewable energy strategy. A link to this is to increase trade and investment. That's why Alba and her team have brought this project forward, is to raise awareness of Montserrat's potential as a trade and investment destination, to raise Montserrat's vision as a hub of sustainable tourism, sustainable agriculture, sustainable energy. So it is a showcase. We are on show, and you will be more so in November, and when the trade mission comes in February, this is the time to shine. So let's look at this as preparatory work, making sure that we can present a very coherent strategy, coherent projects that aren't, that aspirational but realistic. As with all projects, you can't expect somebody to come in, do it, and then leave. I think we need to embrace local knowledge, local capacity, and make sure that these projects, wherever they're built, how they're built, are sustained over the long term. So that's creating local capacity and knowledge, building a workforce, getting the training in Montserrat so that these projects are well maintained, and the first project brings on to the second and third and fourth. I'll just quickly say what my business is called. It's called Green Crowd, UK-based. We're a partnership. The green is about doing things that are green. The crowd is us as the team, but you are our stakeholders, our clients, really working together to find the right solutions. We don't have all the solutions available in our heads. We need input, and hence the town hall. So the green and the crowd together is effectively a college of people working together who are impacted by the reality that climate change brings. I'll skip over these slides. One thing that UK is very good at is skill sharing, and that's where effectively somebody comes with ideas that or experiences from abroad, and they share those skills and knowledge with their counterparts. And that's what we've done across Brazil, South Africa, India, and now here in Montserrat. It's really about sort of what have we seen in other markets that could be brought here to the UK. But importantly, it's not a one-way arrow, it's a sort of two-way arrow. We need to learn from where we are as well. I can't sort of promote something that doesn't work here. It's got to work both ways. And that sort of skill sharing between the two countries is vital. There are 5 key aspects of the roadmap. There's the review and analysis, analyze what we have, what has been done, and quite a lot has been done, what has worked and what hasn't worked. Okay, and that's a simple. Well, it's not as simple. It's really trying to sort of map out independently what is working and what needs to be done. What are the priorities? And when we look at projects, we have to look at it. Is it commercial? Is it affordable? Who will fund it? How will it be funded? How will it be paid back? And how does it add value to Montserrat? I think that's a really key thing. And when priority, you've got to sort of put real numbers behind it. Otherwise, it becomes a dream, and then dreams aren't fulfilled, and there's frustration. So let's get the data right, and that's really important for today. As I mentioned today, showcasing November, a delegation comes to London. February, a delegation comes to Montserrat. Let's put our best show on for these investors and make sure that they really grab the opportunities. And the key is building momentum, getting the projects the right exposure with the right audience. Because finding the right delivery partner is, it's not a needle in the haystack, but it is an art and not a science. Sorry, I'm blending my metaphors here, but we need the right delivery partners for Montserrat. Absolutely. People who care about this country, care about the long-term consequences of their projects, and make sure that the projects last. And the right capital needs to be sourced as well. There's no point putting a green bond on Montserrat when there isn't in the capital markets yet. But let's figure that out through this roadmap, through this consultation. And let's make the projects happen. Let's take them out of the consultant's textbook and into the reality. I think that's really the key part of the roadmap. And in operation, as I mentioned before, build that local knowledge. Let's make sure that the first plant or the first project then brings on the second and third, and those can be built and maintained locally, not having to wait months or weeks for spare parts or somebody to fly over. The last thing I would say is my belief is seeing is believing. So even if you start off small and you aim high, I think that's a better route than aiming high and not achieving that. So I think we're very much of the view, let's find the right projects to do quickly. Let's do them every year, and that will grow. That will create its own momentum, its own interest. There'll be mistakes done, like with every project, there are always mistakes and learnings from those mistakes that need to happen. But our approach is really very much incrementally grow the renewable energy sector and blue economy sector in Montserrat. So that's me done. Today's town hall is really to hear your views on three key aspects. Renewable energy opportunities in Montserrat, what do you think they are? Where do you see them happening? How do you see them happening? Then there's renewable energy in relation to agriculture, ecotourism, other industries. And we've got a panel here to answer any questions you might have. And the third aspect is blue economy. You're surrounded by sea, rich in life, a beauty that's unsurpassed. What do you see as the real tangible opportunities in the blue economy stroke tourism sector? So the floor is yours. Please ask any questions that you think relevant, and I'll take any questions as they are. Sorry? I can. Sorry, I hadn't appreciated that I hadn't flicked my slides, but. Yeah. Yeah, so any questions before we sort of throw out a few questions, or any questions so far in terms of? None? Such an important topic? Go on, so there's certainly...
to take the role of icebreaker in these town hall meetings. but I relish the role and I step up to the challenge. My first concern, an overriding concern, is why are we always looking for quick and fast? Why are we always having these aggressive project timelines? It has not worked for us over the past 30 years, and it's not going to work for us going forward. We need to think big and do things in a transformational manner. You, in your speaking just now, and all I've heard all along, is that we must do things incrementally and do a little piece here and somebody will come and do. That has not worked for us. It will not work for us going forward. We need to pick something and do it. Start doing it. It doesn't have to finish in a year, 2 years, even 5 years. Countries that have developed have created projects that last 15, 20, 30 years. The Victoria Line in London just opened this year, right? How long did it take? We have to have big vision. Our vision in Montserrat is simply too narrow, and we're trying to fit into too many small project timelines. We absolutely need a new airport, an airport that can accommodate at a minimum the 40-seater regional aircraft that will transform access into Montserrat. If we have that type of airlift, we do not need a ferry. 40+ passengers per day per flight is 660 just for 4 flights. That would take care of us in our current peak period. So why are we just need to stop focusing on short term. Let us spend some serious money and not address, because that's what we've been doing. We've been addressing problems. We need to do something, what I've heard all the politicians all over Montserrat say, we need to fix things. And in order to fix things, you have to address it aggressively and bigly, according to Mr. Trump. Right? So when I look back, for example, I'll sit down in a moment. I realize I might be going on too much. But when we look, for example, at the airport at Gerald's, the ask at the time was to reintroduce fixed-wing aircraft into Montserrat. That was such a narrow view, absolutely narrow view. 40 years ago, we had 40-seater aircraft landing in Montserrat every day on a regular basis. When the crisis started, it was C-130 aircraft that came in here after Hurricane Hugo into our airport. We're now living with 9-seater aircraft. That will not cut it going forward. The British government DFID spent £6 million, £6 million, on the airport at Gerald's. Embarrassing. 2 years later, they turned around and they spent $285 million on the airport in St. Helena. Montserrat's problem was never fixed. We tinkered around the edges. And I'm afraid that is what we're doing. We're talking about the renewables and what have you. 40 years ago, 40+ years ago, those windmill towers that you see on St. George's Hill, that's how old they are. That's late 80s technology. Wind turbines in this day and age can produce more than 2 megawatts of energy each. That's our capacity, that's our peak requirements in Montserrat. So why are we faffing about? We can get wind generation that could provide for all our needs. I am told that the solar farm in Lookout provides more than 50% of the power that we need on a good day. That means if we quadruple the size of the farm, we could get all the power that we need for a peak period. We have the answers already. And at the risk of annoying some people, I want to say, and sit down, going into Corkhill area to develop geothermal in an area that could be back sometime under an exclusion zone is, to me, a wrong-headed way. It doesn't make sense to me, personally, right? I think we can develop other renewables over on this side, wind and solar, and put 3 generators in the power station. The power station was built with the capacity for 3 generators, and we bought 1. Because as always, we're tinkering around the edges, tinkering around the edges. What's the point of building up a power station with the approved specifications N+2 and put 1? Makes no sense. So let me sit down now. I'm conscious of maybe rambling too much. Thank you.
Anyone want to respond on the runway?
I mean, I think you touched on access. I think it's a key factor for even private sector investments, right? So that's a really important aspect, and I hope that that would be part of your analysis and consideration. I just wanted to clarify one aspect in terms of short-term project. The incremental approach is exactly what you're referring to in terms of not a short-term fix. So when we engage with private sector investors, it would be in areas like you mentioned, right? So this is why this conversation is so important, to help identify what are the investments we need, because not all investments can come from government. So we also need private sector investments, both from here, but also from, say, the UK or other countries. So this is why this conversation is so important, because you can say, based on your experience, we should not prioritize this area, but we should prioritize another area. So contributions like that are really helpful. But rest assured that what we're trying to do is not to have a short-term, short-fix approach. It is small, the budget that we have for this project, but what it will do is to bring together people. So if, for instance, you say these 2-3 projects are key, then we can find potential right investors that you can partner up with, for example. And that lasts beyond the duration of the project. So I just wanted to make that clarification on that point.
Does that answer your question, sir? Does that answer your question in terms of, yeah, it's not short term, it's just sort of doing things that are affordable that can...
That's short term.
But
we need to do things transformational. We need to spend serious money. 160-something pounds, 67,000 pounds or something. I saw that figure someplace floating around for this project. Come on. What can you do in that regard?
No. The funding is really not for projects. The funding is to bring investors here together to discuss with people like yourself and to identify key projects that you would want investments in. So we're not. The funding that we have is not for a project. It's actually to allow us to represent Montserrat, to have key people represent Montserrat at these forums.
Yes.
So we can have your voice heard.
Yes,
and,
but we also need to open a Montserrat investment arm that has to be funded with serious money, because you need to attract serious people, know what to do, who can go to Enterprise UK and deal with certain things on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because, yeah.
And the other one thing I wanted to mention as well is that we cannot seriously expect to attract outside business to an environment with a 30% corporate tax. Forget about that.
I agree with you, and this is why, as part of the project, we are looking at regulations as well. So that's part of the analysis. So we're looking at regulations and what we can do to streamline and improve the business environment. And we're also producing some assets, like an Invest in Montserrat website, like a sort of one-stop shop. But regulation is a key component of the project. So we completely agree with that. Yeah.
Any other questions before we take some questions to the panel? Dr. Maloney, can we ask a question about agriculture, sustainable agriculture? What do you see the opportunities in agriculture that link to energy?
Well, good evening, everyone, first of all. Agriculture and energy, how you tie them together. It's pretty simple. In our climate, in our conditions in Montserrat, and we're looking at production, you look at Montserrat and see it's a small place, so you're thinking it's very easy to produce, to sustain a market in any commodity. But when you're just producing for immediate consumption, or just for what the demand is, then as soon as the demand increases, whether it be for a reason of it's just after the summer break, everybody's back out to school, so specific commodity consumption that increases, whether it's March, whether it's December, we have a lot more people on island. How do you deal with that increase when you're only producing for a specific demand? Storage. Now, under the current cost of fuel, storage, cold storage, would not make sense financially to any farmer. When you look at the costs of running, just to say a refrigerated container reefer, you would know what a reefer would cost to run for a month. And you had agricultural products in there. The content is not packed, but you have sufficient in there, okay? If you spread that electricity bill over the commodities in there, then they don't make any sense anymore. You can't retail them. So you're looking at trying to improve Montserrat's, I wouldn't say, I never liked the term food security, but we're looking at being able to have some sustainability in our production and our supply and demand. And one of the ways we have to do that, we have to look at storage. We must look at storage. But storage at the moment is too expensive because of energy. Now, if you have renewable energy, whether it comes from solar, whether it comes from wind, whether it comes from geothermal, and it can be, and let me highlight this part, it can be produced efficiently, because any of these renewable energies can be produced, yes, but they can be produced inefficiently and end up costing us more. Y'all understand that concept? Right. So what we're looking at for agriculture is storage, lowering energy costs for storage, which will translate to cheaper product and more readily available, a consistent supply of any commodity, one. Two, we are looking in agriculture, we put a lot of focus on coming out of open field, that is what you see a ground, what we call a ground, right? And we're looking at shaded production. So whether it's a full-blown greenhouse, or it could be just a simple system as just the top is covered with shade cloth. And you have raised beds, or you have a hydroponic system in there, you have an aquaponic system in there, whatever system you have in there, it eliminates a lot of the factors that will reduce your yield. You're doing open field production, and I see Keller in here, so I know he has had some of these issues. You have agoutis, you have iguanas, you have loose livestock, you have pretty larceny, you have insects, you have adverse weather conditions. Now, under shaded production, you can control all of these. And depends on how deep you go into the shaded production and how modernized you have it, with extractor fans, sprinkler systems, automated climate control system in there. It needs to be powered. And again, we are facing two things: expensive power, unreliable power supply. That's the fact that we're facing, because all of us see the power outages and all of us know what our electricity bill looks like. So what we're looking at for agriculture is efficiently, cost-friendly form of renewable energy, which in the long run will allow us to store, one, and then we will be able to produce not just for our immediate demand, but for periods when the demand is increased, our production may have fallen off for some reason, then you have that little buffer, which we have with storage. So that's one of the ways that I'm looking at renewable energy assisting with agriculture and assisting us with food sustainability. Because when I look at food security, it's a term that's been thrown around in the region carelessly. Food security, when you look at it in its entirety, is basically making sure that a country has enough food to feed its population for X amount of time. It does not take into consideration how the food is produced, how it's stored, how it's manufactured, none of that. So a lot of times when countries, more developed countries, try to achieve food security, it actually destroys the smaller farmer. And persons don't look at it that way. When you look at food sustainability, you're looking at including your smaller farmers, you're looking at how it's produced, you're looking at the economics behind it, you're looking at the health side of it, and you're looking at, of course, making sure that your farmers, your local farmers, have a piece of that pie. So they're producing, you're buying from them, and you're encouraging them to produce in such a way that the country can depend on them and we can reduce our imports. So CARICOM has a mandate, which has started, I think, in 2023, that all the CARICOM countries combined should reduce their food import bill by 25% by 2025. And CARICOM they have acknowledged the fact that it cannot be done without storage. So they have projects that are rolling out with regards to cold storage, and they have projects rolling out with regards to shade house production, greenhouses, and stuff like that. All of these, of course, are tied directly back to energy. And if you even get, let's say some funding agency sends down 20 storage units, cold storage units, unless it's a 100% government subsidized program that the government pays for the electricity bill 100%, it will be useless. We can produce and we can put stuff in a container, yes, we can in the cold storage, yes, but what happens when that bill comes in and then you have to divide that bill by 5 farmers, 3 farmers, whatever the case may be, and the amount of the commodity in there, let's just say, for argument's sake, is valued at $10,000. And the electricity bill is $12,000. What does that do to the cost of the commodity? You have to add that to the cost of your production now, and then we have to pass that cost on to you, the consumer. Then the consumer looks at it and says, that's more expensive than the imported stuff. I am looking, yes, I want to eat healthy, but the healthy part is in the back door, in the back of my mind, and the front of my mind is what my pocket can afford. So if in the drive for food sustainability and in the drive for local production and in the drive for eating healthier, the cost of the product always comes first. Always comes first. So this is why I'm looking at that renewable energy and how important it is to agriculture, how important it is to the future of agriculture. I mean, COVID-19 gave us a wake-up call around the world on how vulnerable we are in terms of feeding ourselves and taking care of ourselves. And if we can reduce some of that vulnerability by closing or even just pushing in the door with regards to energy production, that is a start, and that is a catalyst for any developer that wants to come to Montserrat to do any business. As you were talking about corporate tax at 30%, you look at any business that want to set up here, the cost of the energy. If it's a manufacturing plant, we have water, and if we have renewable energy, that is at a good cost, a good price, a cheap price, that's attractive for somebody to come here and invest in, whether it be agriculture, whether it be in a IT framework, or it's whatever commodities out there that you want to set up a business here. If the cost of your production can be kept low, then it will be attractive for your profit line. And every single aspect of production and anything has an energy input in my books. So that's where I look at green energy and the importance of it towards agriculture.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Wait, question? Yeah, well.
You want to ask the question before he adds something?
I'm not so sure I'm going to be dealing with a question per se, but it has to deal with your presentation.
Okay.
And I am glad I waited to support my friend here for after your presentation, because you've made a very good case for what he calls a transformational input. Because if we have enough, and it's been, I don't know how many experts came and said to us that we have so much energy that there's no way we could deal with all of it. All we need is enough that we can deal with everything you say there without little piece here and a little piece there, and whoever else has ideas with respect to things outside of your food security thing. All of this outside of that could be taken care of by one reason. Well, he mentioned solar and wind. We have that. Everybody else around have solar and wind. But not everybody has geothermal. And geothermal is of a nature that you don't, well, depending on where you pitch your development, has the ability to provide you with energy to do all those little things you want, including the storage you were talking about. As a matter of fact, it's probably ideal for that storage that you're talking about, right? And it does not necessarily mean that we use or convert our geothermal energy to electricity to accomplish that. In any case, what I'm saying, is that if we were to do what Mr. West said with respect to a transformational investment in our economy, right? It would also take care of some of the aspects of access, which we are suffering from. One of the things that I've proposed is that we have our transport sector being fueled, if you want to call it that way, fueled by our geothermal production of energy. So we don't have to buy diesel for a boat to go to Antigua and come back, or a plane for that matter to go to Antigua and come back. Because the technology is there to utilize that energy, right? And it can be done in almost every sector today with the technology that we have. All of those little things that you do with a greenhouse, and it requires this little energy here and there, right? A farmer would not need to worry about his electricity cost at all. And the government of the day, if that infrastructure for geothermal was in place, it could be such that they can in fact afford the 100% subsidy that you speak about. That can't be done in most of those other countries, right? In the region. So we could even reach the point where we could produce locally and export. We can export not only our energy, but we can export the products that we create from our energy. This is something which is, I believe, very fundamental. And you know something? We talk about how small we are. One of the problems with being small is that it doesn't take much to do what we ask for. So therefore, people feel we don't really need it. When we ask, they say, oh, that's simple matters. we have money in the bank. We could always go to the bank and borrow it and take it or whatever you want to call it, right? But when you go to the bank, if you tell them you want money to build a plant in Corkhill, they will ask you, how are you going to repair us, number one. Number two, the risk involved, are the insurers going to support you? And you're not getting the money unless the insurers say, yes, we will, in case of all those little things. How do we attract investment under conditions such as this, right? Everybody says the private sector must lead the development. The private sector can only lead the development if the public sector has the infrastructure to support the private sector to do what little bit they're doing, if they can afford to do it. If they can have energy, you said, is at the base of almost anything we do. And we have the situation here where we can produce the energy to deal with our very small population and our small size and excess. The thing about geothermal is if you put in a plant, a suitable plant, you can scale it in terms of what you produce efficiently. You can go beyond what you need. And in reality, you do not need additional infrastructure to ramp it up. When you ramp it up, that additional that you produce is essentially at no cost, because the fuel that comes from geothermal does not increase in cost, and storage and all the other good stuff that they always throw on us when you want to get a bigger generator or whatever it is. The cost over and above what we actually need today, we could ramp it up in 2 years, and it does not cost us any additional in infrastructure or whatever else. It's there. Why can't we use it? And if we're talking about transformational, what better way to have something which is in place that varies with the demand, and it does not escalate the supply costs, right? If it does escalate it, it's minimal, right? We have it here. We have what it takes to do it. Why don't we go that way? I'm not opposed to all the other little things that I hear about in terms of all of that stuff. I don't have a problem with it.
You are preaching to the choir, because this is what you're saying here is all what we're saying. So we agree with you 100%, and we're on board with you. That's the plan. That's what we're looking at. That's what we're looking at. If regards to geothermal, whether it's geothermal, solar, or wind. Your friend right behind you, the police officer, he will tell you, we've had discussions, hold on one second, on solar. And I always argue with him and I tell him, I don't like solar. Solar is too expensive to start up. I like geothermal. You know, it's varying opinions on that topic. But you are 100% correct in everything you're saying. We're not arguing with you. We're together.
And you have a problem when they talk about solar in a lot of instances, because the land that it occupies is competing with the possible agricultural use.
The line, what do you mean?
Right?
I don't understand. Or the lands, not all the time, because if you're looking at, let's just say you have a greenhouse, or shaded house, you can put the solar panels on the roof. So it does not have to be always mounted on the ground.
Yes, but we're talking about, again, the little itsy-bitsy. What about the rest of the consumers? What about the rest of the population? I'm not just talking about what is necessary for your small agricultural production, right? I'm saying that if you were to ramp it up to the point where you're using solar and wind, and that's the other issue with, there's another issue with wind that I can raise, but I won't raise it right now, because I don't think it is.
Drawback. Everything has a drawback. Everything. Everything has some little form of a drawback to it.
Right.
Everything.
Exactly.
Nothing will ever be perfect.
Exactly.
And
nothing is
once
perfect.
we understand that in this world, it helps us.
But if we have to choose, right, where we go?
What are the conditions that we choose under? There are factors that will determine the choice we make, wouldn't it?
I agree, but there's one other point I want to make.
Can we, since we're on geothermal, sir, we've got an esteemed colleague, Dr. Ryan, here, who can...
I think he has to have a question.
So maybe can we hear a little bit from Dr. Ryan about geothermal, and then at least we know what the landscape looks like. Otherwise, we might sort of deviate too much into this discussion.
But thank you very much for your comments. They were well taken and understood.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ryan, maybe just sort of lay the land for geothermal, where we're at, how you see it. And there was a concern about the location, obviously, of the geothermal.
Well, I didn't really have that much to add. It was just to echo what Mr. West was saying. So obviously, one of the concerns is the volcanic risk. And part of any kind of development plan going forward has to be looking at what those risks are and seeing how can they be mitigated, whether it's through location of plant or whether the plant can be engineered in a way that it can be resistant to the hazards in that area and so on. So that's absolutely fundamental. And it's like when we've had those discussions, that's something that obviously, given what I do, something that I kind of raise as a top line thing to look at. And then also alluding to what Mr. White was saying and also what Selwyn was saying in terms of potential for storage of agricultural produce and using the geothermal energy. One technology, so there are two kinds of main uses for geothermal energy. One is the kind of most exciting and most bang for the buck, which is turn it into electricity, because you can do whatever you want with electricity. It's a really nice form of energy. But there also is direct use, where you use that heat directly to do something. So whether it's you create like a spa, like Marissa is interested in, or you can dry agricultural produce. You can, one project I saw in Guatemala was where they were using the geothermal heat directly to process volcanic material into building materials like blocks and different kinds of things, shingles and different things like that, use that heat to do that directly. And then coming to what the problem that Selma was talking about is, so when you generate electricity, you separate. You separate. Well, in one technology, you create the steam and then you use that to run a turbine, and then you have a hot brine afterwards, which is essentially like a waste fluid, and you can use that energy using something called an absorption chiller to actually turn that heat energy and create a cooling. So the waste heat from actually generating electricity could be used to create a chiller. So you'd have, I haven't done the calculations, but if you're generating, say, a megawatt of energy, like maybe you have like a few megawatts of cooling from the waste energy. So that's kind of one kind of synergy. And because Montserrat is a small place, you know, if you have like a big cooling area, which is, you know, basically that would be running on free energy because it's just like waste energy essentially, unless you want to do something else with it. That could be, you know, something that could work in a place like Montserrat where it's small and, you know, you can move things to that central storage. But as I said, like one of the key things to consider is the volcanic risk, and can that be, you know, what is the level of that risk, and what kind of mitigations can be put in place in terms of how the plant is engineered, how it's situated, and all that sort of things to make it where it is, you know, where it makes sense. That was what I was going to say on that.
I mean, to add a sort of my viewpoint, I visited the geothermal site twice now, and it is there. There are 2 wells that are producing. You know, it's proven resource. It's just a case of taking it to the next step. Your gentleman, you know, thinking big and making sure that that happens. There's been a lot of investment and time and resource already invested in the geothermal. It's there. Let's make it happen. The question is, what are the steps to doing that? You know, is it a case of a big check being written? Probably unlikely. So it has to be done affordably and commercially. Marisa, do you want to sort of talk about, sort of give us an overview of how you see the world in renewable energy for Montserrat?
Good evening, everyone. So I'm the Acting Director of Energy, so it's good to hear everyone's views on the different potential renewable energy. Marisa Allen. Potential for renewable energy in Montserrat. So I want to start off by saying, obviously, Montserrat is one of the Caribbean countries that are blessed to have numerous forms of potential renewable energy, the 3 main ones being solar, wind, and geothermal. As Mr. White would have pointed out, there are pros and cons to each of them. If you were to put a solar plant, a bigger solar plant in, you would have to ensure that that plant is big enough to cover your daily needs. You have enough battery storage to then cover you throughout the night. And one of the things that came up was, obviously, we have cloud cover. You have days where it's rainy. So what do you do on those days where you're not producing enough solar energy? So the ideal plan is to have what we call an energy mix. You want to kind of have a piece of like 3 or 4 different types of energy. The intention would be to have geothermal pretty much covering base load because it's pretty consistent. It's not affected by if the wind is blowing or not blowing, is it blowing too strong? It's not affected by cloud cover or if the sun is setting and it's now night. There are other things that can affect it, but I want to say maybe they're not as big a risk.
Yeah, I mean, like geothermal is known to have by far like the highest capacity factor of any renewable energy. It's like over 90%.
Right. So you would look at it from that standpoint and then potentially incorporate solar and wind to cover demand during the day. So how I see it is you'd want to kind of be progressing all of them at the same time. I don't know if that fits into the transformational plan that you're thinking, Mr. West, but in my opinion, you can't focus on just one because that puts you in a position that when something happens, you don't have a fallback plan. Now, the fallback plan, even with renewable, would still be to have diesel generators there for standby. We are in hurricane belt, which there are other places such as, I think, Puerto Rico that potentially is still paying for a solar farm that got destroyed. You want to have numerous forms to ensure that if one goes down, be it due to like natural disaster or maintenance, that you have other forms that pick up that slack.
Yeah, thank you, Marie. We've talked a lot about energy. Should we talk a little bit about sustainable tourism? And maybe I ask Mrs. West to sort of tell us a bit more about the opportunities in tourism and how they're linked to lower cost of energy or sustainable energy.
Okay,
Mrs.
good
West.
evening, everybody. This is Rosetta West Gerald, Tourism Authority. So tourism and agriculture are linked in so many ways. And I know Dr. Maloney would have mentioned how important food sustainability is, not only for Montserrat and the residents here, but for visitors who come to the island. And so that is critical. I would like to say, for example, just to put it a little step further, accommodation providers and other providers for tourism, they require energy, electricity for accommodations, for example. A lot of people, especially because of the heat, they need ACs, fans, etc. If there's a way to bring down the cost of putting these ACs into accommodations, this would be definitely useful. In terms of other areas of tourism that links with agriculture and other areas, you have, of course, the blue economy, where you have diving, scuba diving, snorkeling, etc. Money can be made from that sector. And in terms of finding some ways to link renewable energy to that sector is also important. I'm just here thinking, why can't Montserrat be a green destination, totally green destination, or the green destination in the Caribbean, the only one? We're small enough to be able to meet that criteria, I think, and it will definitely bode well for tourism and for everything else that we've been speaking about. Thank you.
Questions from the audience on tourism, or personal experience with renewable energy? Anyone drive an EV or has driven an EV elsewhere? Anybody installed solar on their roof? Any kind of themes that we've talked about they've had personal experience of? Please shout.
Good evening, everyone. All right. Firstly, I'm a big advocate of solar technology. Dr. Maloney alluded to that fact. I'm an engineer by profession, and we like to deal with, we were trained, as a matter of fact, to attack the root causes of the problems. And while we're all here talking about renewable energy and its effect on Montserrat, I'm going to ask a question. I'm not sure if anyone is in the room that is able to answer it, but are there any long-term plans with regards to the transformational structure of the MUL, the technology that they have, with regards to the power lines? Because while we're having all the ideas, if we cannot transmit this power, good power, that we're going to create, then it makes no sense, all right? And why I'm saying that, it will lead to the next point that I have. We have something called a grid tie system within the solar technology, where every household, or the household, will provide enough power that will feed back to the grid. Now, Marissa touched on the point that the large solar farms and being ineffective and vulnerable to large storms, and if it's destroyed, it's a lot of money. Now, we can eliminate that fact or reduce that risk by having solar farms on every houses, or most houses, right? And if a storm should come, it takes about an hour to just pull those panels off. Now, again, if you're talking about a solar plant, it needs to work effectively or efficiently. And most solar plants, all solar plants, when they're working efficiently, they will produce excess, right? The bulk of the price for any PV installation, it goes in the battery or the storage, right? The grid tie systems, they have no batteries, all right? So the power comes in from the sun, it goes into the house, it sends it back out, sends the excess, and feeds the grid. Again, that will reduce the cost of MUL producing power by generators or fossil fuels. All right, so I'm not sure, again, if anybody can answer the question, what are the long-term plans with the structural reformation of the distributive system on island? Because, again, we want to see Montserrat going greener, but if we don't have the infrastructure, then it makes no sense. Thank you.
Important point. Marisa, do you want to take this one?
Okay, so as it pertains to the distribution network, there are two options. Putting the lines back overhead, which has a lesser cost than going underground, but reduces how resilient it is. As I said, we are a hurricane-prone area, so you're looking at it from the standpoint of if we do have even just the fringe of a storm coming through, you have trees coming down, rockfall that could take out poles. So ideally, you want to go underground. Both of those options are being investigated for MUL, but also looking at upgrading that system so that there is the potential capacity to have power sent, in a sense, back to the plant. Now, this is also due to the fact that if we are to do the geothermal plant, it would be in Cargill, so you'd need to send the power, if not to a substation somewhere in Salem, potentially all the way back to Braids. So all of those different plans are being looked into. As it pertains to the distributed solar network, which you're speaking of, so having different people have solar on their roof, something that we've also discussed, and we're looking at a number of factors. If you were to install a solar, well, you have it already, on your roof, and you're sending power back to MUL, most people are not going to want to do that for free. So there's a cost that will be associated with that. Now, yes, chances are it'll be less than the fuel surcharge, but it's now working out what's the best cost to pay you that doesn't ultimately carry up the cost of electricity for people who don't have, or all residents on Montserrat, and where MUL is still profitable. So it's like crunching those numbers. Now, that's probably pretty straightforward to do. But you also want to take into consideration, for instance, persons that rent. So if I don't own the home that I live in, my landlord having a solar system on technically his or her roof doesn't benefit me. It benefits my landlord. So you want to ensure that everyone that benefits from it is, you're not just touching one side or one subset of persons. The other side of that is if you as the producer, in a sense, don't have batteries, MUL will, because we have to stabilize it. There could be cloud cover in Salem, there's no cloud cover somewhere else, and it's sudden. Salem production drop, but the demand does not drop. And if you have your supply dropping below your production and you don't have like your diesel generators actually just running on standby, which kind of reduces the benefit of renewable energy, your grid goes down because you don't have the production to match your demand. So you still have to have some amount of battery storage either on the private sector side or in MUL to kind of stabilize things. So if there's a drop, if your system just generally goes down, whatever the case may be, that it doesn't affect the entire grid. So there are a few other factors to take into consideration, and for us it's a case where we definitely want to ensure that whatever we implement in Montserrat is not just good for MUL, but good for everyone that lives here, everyone that visits, business owners, whoever it is. You want to ensure that everyone kind of gets a slice of that pie.
Maurice.
You touched on the point with regards to the economics. I did a case study. I love solar. I did a case study that was done, I researched a case study that was done in Arizona. And with regards to the solar, the finances behind it, of course, MUL has to make money. And during the day when the homes are producing, they're feeding to the grid, but then the sun goes down in the night, all right? So MUL has to supply these homes because they don't have batteries which will provide the homes. So MUL has to supply them. Now, what they did, or what they're doing now in these first world countries, is that the cost that you will sell them, they do it by credits, right? So that's physical money. So the cost that you will sell the power to MUL is actually a little less than what they will give you back in the night. And there's a time difference, there's a time in the evening where everybody uses the most electricity, which is about like 6 and 9, right? And during those times, the incentive is if you use less energy during that time, you pay less, all right? So they make it so expensive, MUL will make it so expensive during that time that it will push you to use less energy during the nights. And it gets cheaper beyond 9 or 10 o'clock in the night. I'm not sure if everybody is following. All right, so that's another incentive for everybody to meet halfway, if you want to call it like that. So yes, MUL has to make money, and that is how they make money. But the long-term the long-term analysis of all this is that it will still cost less overall if you have the PV system installed on your homes. Because if you're paying, say, $300, $400 a month for mole, the electricity, you will not pay this. With the combined system of mole giving back the credits in the night, you sending the credits in the day, it will not be $400 per month. It will be less. All right? So, and the other case study point is that the sun, we can't control it. We can't control the cloud cover. And with regards to the sun shading, the big plants, the drawbacks of having big plants is that if it's partially shaded, the production is down. All right? So it is highly unlikely that every house on Montserrat will be shaded. All right? So while it's shaded in Lookout, it's not necessarily shaded in Salem. So that will pick up the drop or the drastic energy drop that is being experienced in Lookout. All right? So again, I'm a big advocate of PV systems on your homes. And it will take time. It will take time for the implementation of these grid-tie systems. I mean, I think the electric code has to be revised. Persons have to be trained to install them, inspect them. So mole, this is another way for mole to make money. If you have the inspectors for mole, they have to be inspected every single year to make sure that they're working according to standards. So again, mole makes money. My point.
Thank you, sir. I think this is a start of a negotiation on tariff. So, Marisa, I think we better crunch some numbers and see how much we can pay users or providers of electricity.
Good afternoon.
Madam. Good afternoon.
I just have a simple question. I think we have all acknowledged that renewable energy could be transformational, using Mr. West's words, and touches so many areas of our lives and how we live. And that is something that is necessary. My question is, in a small population like Montserrat, I'm not sure who is going to fund the infrastructure around any of these, but how do we balance the investor return against putting the costs on the consumers? That's my question.
Very good question. And as you can see, is it affordable and commercial is one of the key aspects. Do you want me to take that? Sorry. Yeah, I think it's a perfectly valid. I mean, that is the nub of the question: what is affordable, right? Because somebody's got to pay for the system. There's a transmission distribution infrastructure that we talked about that needs upgrading. We need to link the geothermal plant to Salem or to Braids once that's operational. There's a lot of investment that's needed to bring the core infrastructure up to a standard where everybody's electricity is reliable. Who pays? That is the nub of the question. Now, in an ideal world, somebody else pays and we all have a free lunch. That's not going to happen. So we need to size these opportunities within an envelope that's affordable. Okay, so the geothermal plant, unless somebody comes in with free money, the return that the investor or the developer gets has to be matched by what we or you as a population can afford. So. And remember, one of my the first one's a key one. It's to reduce energy costs. It's not to increase energy costs. We're not doing this, because we love green technology, but you're going to pay twice what you pay. You already pay far too much. So that has to be the number one guiding factor behind any project. It's got to reduce energy. Yeah, investment in the grid is absolutely crucial too. And also the move away from fossil fuels. So those three things intertwined are the core part of that project. And what we have to do as a team, collectively with you, is figure out those financial mechanics to make it work. Whether it's, as the nice gentleman there said, putting solar on the roof and selling some electricity back into the grid, making that project work for a homeowner, reducing the cost, amortizing the cost. And then it comes to geothermal. What is an appropriate tariff that can give some remuneration back to the project developer? So those kind of key questions are what this roadmap is seeking to address. We don't have all the answers yet, but that is absolutely the nub of it. And thank you very much for bringing that up.
A lot of people preface their statements by saying, I don't want to belabor the point. I'm going to belabor the point. Right? Any investment in renewable energy production has to be transformative, and it has to be huge. Here's why. We're talking about the cost effectiveness and affordability. Right now, we already have a solar farm which is producing over half, I'm told. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Sami. During the day, it's producing over half of the requirements for Montserrat. But our bill has not gone down because the diesel engines are still running. Therefore, they're still burning diesel, and we still have to pay for it. There's the fuel surcharge that we have to pay is still there. So if one or two people, like my friend here, now I know who is causing my electricity bill to go up. If he comes off the grid and he doesn't pay more, then I have to pay the fuel surcharge that he would have been paying. Let's understand that. So this is why it has to be transformational. And that is why it has to be, as you said just now, it has to be almost free money every time. Because no investor is going to put money in to get back in 50 years. Everybody wants their money back kind of in a hurry. The banks want their money back kind of in a hurry. You know? So dabbling around the edges is not going to work. We have to decide. Let me put this in perspective. The geothermal development in Corkhill has already cost the UK government, the FID, £17 million. They don't like to say it because it has been up to now the most expensive project in Montserrat. The port will be more expensive, the hospital will be more expensive, but up to now, the single most expensive project in Montserrat was the geothermal. And I sat in this very room and listened to a DFID representative beat his chest and say, "It is my project." And then it failed, and it's stuck for the last 10 years. So everybody's kind of shying away from it. If we've already spent £17 million, we need to just make a decision. Are we going to leave that as sunken cost, waste cost, or are we going to put some more money into it and make it a reality? Because that's the only way. Or are we going to abandon it and we go full bore into something else? But anything we do, we have to do it purposefully. Tinkering around the edges and one or two people coming off the grid and selling back to Mull is not going to reduce the cost. It has to change altogether. So maybe I've belabored the point enough.
No, you make some very valid remarks there. And I think on the geothermal, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, this, as I said, it's a proven resource. It's here. Yes, there is money already spent. We can see that there is a geothermal resource coming out of those production wells. The question is, how do we take it to the step, or the next step, where it is producing? So it is transformational, and what we are trying to do is find that right delivery partner and the right financing to make sure that project happens.
We've been at it for 10 years. There's no right partner out there. I'm saying that's been happening for the last 10 years. This government has gone to the market at least twice, Dr. Sami? Once. The previous government has gone to the market. It is not working. That approach is not working. We have to recognize that there has to be public money spent. Public monies were already spent towards an end. It was a means to an end. If we put Montserrat on this footing with geothermal energy, the theory was that they can then do other things and develop into self-sustainability. Same with the airport. If you give a long enough airport, a big enough strip, then you can do other things to get into self-sustainability. But if you only do a little pinch here, a little pinch there, like I heard somebody say, extend the airport by 200 feet. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, because that doesn't change the dynamic. It doesn't allow us to bring in more than a 9-seater. I hear people talking about buying new Tecnam planes. Foolish, nonsense. We cannot develop Montserrat bringing 9 or 7 people in at a time. Let's just understand that. And somebody needs to just put their hands in their pocket, and we know who should and could. We know very well who should and could. $15 billion worth of ODA, right? And we're only asking for maybe 50? Come on, it's doable. But this thing about going to the private sector and all these investors, that's not going to work. Why are we fooling ourselves?
Thank you for those remarks. I think in terms of the approach, it is finding the right delivery partner, and noted your comments about it hasn't, the market approach hasn't worked in the past. But so that's what we're working on, is how to really make this a reality. In terms of the free money, I don't think it's out there. You know, I can't speak on behalf of the UK government, but we can't expect the UK government to write a blank cheque for an extension of the airport and geothermal just like that. It has to be a considered way where we bring in public and private capital to make it happen.
Economics 101 does not work for Montserrat. It never has when we had a much larger population, and it's worse now. We don't have a private sector that we can say, this is the base of our economy, right? We don't even have the infrastructure that such a private sector can depend on. So that transformative investment, whatever it is, has to be a public investment. Once that is done, then you can start building a private sector of what is in place. Why Economics 101? Provide funding so the entrepreneur can borrow and invest and whatever else other they talk about. That it does not work for Montserrat.
There's only 2,300 households in Montserrat. We try to put things in context.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Are there any areas that we haven't covered in the renewable energy space that anybody would like to ask a question on or comment? I think this is a good debate, and it's absolutely right that we debate these issues, and that's why we're having this town hall. Any other remarks on sustainable tourism? Any ideas of how anybody sees new blue economy tourism? No? Well, in which case, let's just sort of, and the whole point about today really was cooperating, yeah? Bringing together ideas, challenging, and this is really important, to challenge, make sure it happens, and I'm really grateful. We don't have all the answers, we don't have all the money, you know? So we've got to find our way through these knotty problems, but ultimately the fundamentals are strong, and that's worth bearing in mind. Okay, as Marisa said, we keep all options open, prioritize, find the ones that work, that do transform Montserrat. We're not tinkering around the edges. That's not our job. It is to transform, but we've got to do it in the way that we can raise money for. Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Like all participation, all input, great commentary. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you very much. And I'd like to extend special thanks to the panel, to Alba for making all this happen, first and foremost, for Marisa Allen for guiding me this week through the renewable energy and energy landscape here in Montserrat, for Dr. Ryan for providing expert commentary and analysis on geothermal and the Soufrière Hill volcano, Dr. Maloney, on all this discussion on sustainable agriculture. It is so absolutely important to get that right. And the challenges around storage, you know, he outlined very, very well. And Dion, thank you very much indeed for bringing this together. Do you want to? And Rosetta, I beg your pardon. I had the privilege of going around the port with Rosetta and talking to stakeholders in the tourism space. And thank you very much indeed for that wonderful day. Thank you.
All right, just to bring us to a close, thank you again to everybody, especially those persons who came out this evening. As we get ready to leave, I want you to remember this week was the first step in a host of other activities that are being arranged to bring us to the end game of finding the right investors for Montserrat in the areas of renewable energy and blue tourism, blue economy tourism. In November, Remember, we're preparing ourselves at this point to kind of start to build that case for Montserrat for a mission that's going to happen in the UK. So if you have any additional information, comments on this particular project, we would very much like to hear it, and you can channel it through our office.
I just wanted to make one appeal. Going forward, there must be somebody in the Montserrat government, civil service, who takes ownership of this project. It cannot be that that person has 5 other things that they're already doing and you're giving them this extra thing to do. Somebody needs to be employed so that this becomes their baby. We have to have somebody in Montserrat who is responsible. A lot of things have not happened because there's no single responsible person. You give a task to a PS who has a whole ministry to run and all manner of things to be concerned about. We need to focus on giving people a task and stick to that task. And when we hire external consultants and what have you, and the local people, we need to consider a bonus for delivery. I want us to consider that very, very seriously. When you give somebody a task, it cannot be that they work 8 to 4 and what happens at the end of the day. Put something out there, put a carrot, dangle something for achievement. So if this gentleman who was hired to do this particular consultancy, if he ends up delivering a particular investor or business to Montserrat, he should get something extra. And the person in the office, in the Montserrat office, should also benefit from that incentive. You have to incentivize your workers, not just the businesses. And last of all, reduce the corporation tax.
You threw me off with the last one, but a point very well made. A point very well made for a project like this that cuts across so many sectors. It's a point very well made, and noting the various hats that are already worn. And I'm sure it'll be considered in everything else as we go forward. So thank you again, Mr. West. So please, anything additional, feel free to share to whoever you're most comfortable with on the panel, and look forward to hearing from us. And look forward especially to the mission that's going to happen in February, when we expect to bring investors to Montserrat, which is what this is really and truly about. So we do need your input, your advice, your guidance. This was very, very healthy conversation tonight. And it's exactly what we needed to hear to try and start to weed out the information that's been collected and start to put the strategy together. So thank you, everyone. Safe travels home. Thanks, GIU. Ivor, I know you're there. Your team, everybody, thank you very much.